Are you a man that often feels like you don't get the respect that you deserve? This can affect you in every area of your life, starting with your marriage, with your children, and your other relationships, where when you're at work, when you're out in public, just driving down the street even. You commonly have this thought run through your head, and maybe it's fueled by a little bit of anger or frustration. I just don't get the respect that I deserve as a man. The thing is, guys, lasting respect, it's different than maybe some of the definition, if you will, of respect that maybe you think that it is. Lasting respect is is not gained through fear, quick results, status, and achievement. It's not gained through puffing your chest and the alpha male, if you will, of the group. Lasting respect is ultimately built through caring for and with and about others. And for this episode, we're going to dive a little deep into what that means. And the thing is, when you do this, when you build lasting respect, which is what this episode's going to be about, you're going to get the things that ultimately stick with you to the grave. You're going to get the marriage until death. You're going to get the relationships that last for a lifetime, and a vocational investment that just builds lives rather than just wallets. You're going to get a community reputation that affects generations. And there's going to be a lot of small gestures throughout the course of your years ahead that aren't just going to improve a life for a day, but they're going to have a domino effect that ultimately can improve the lives of strangers and positively move things in the right direction generationally. If that's what you want, then keep listening to this episode. And if what you get here helps you or blesses you or encourages you in any way, please remember to follow and subscribe to this podcast or this YouTube channel. And above all, please share with all of your closest friends and family, and let's get the word out together. So to get this going, how is lasting respect gained? Right? Because we know that there is that sort of fear-based, I'm going to demand respect, but I want to make this statement first. Real strong men do not just demand, they demonstrate. Strong men do not demand, they demonstrate. And how is lasting respect gained? By caring for and about others. It's never because of achievement. Most people have a few questions on their mind when they think about whether or not you truly care for them. Do they care about me? Do they see and understand me? Also, do they value and care about others that I also care about? And do you understand them? Because for a man, his wife, his kids, his closest friends, it matters to them, or even a woman, right? It matters to them if you care about the ones that they love as well. So do you see, do you care, do you understand, do you invest the time to do those things? That's ultimately what's going to lead another person into believing that you truly care about them. And when you demonstrate that, that is when you gain lasting respect. So we need to be very clear about the definition of respect, because there is that type of respect that a lot of guys out there feel if I demand and command, they will fear me and they will have to do. Yeah, that's a thing, but that's not a respect that lasts. That's not the type of respect that's going to get you those things that we talked about, like the marriage that lasts for a lifetime and the lifelong relationships that you, most of you, I'm sure, really desire when you really sit back and think about it. So what causes others to be seen and cared for? This is an important question that we need to answer if we're going to get to a place of getting lasting respect. Well, knowing what they care about, first of all, is very important. And how on earth do we know what they care about? It's simple. Spend time with them. Listen to them. If you're too busy to spend time with anybody, or you're too important to give them space to be themselves and to actually hear out what it is that they care about in their lives, you're never going to get to that place with them. It's absolutely essential that we spend time with people, that we get to know them. There's this little thing called love languages. There's 5 different love languages. Spending quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service, tangible gifts. I'm missing one of them, but there's 5 different love languages. There's a book out there. Go ahead and get that book, read it, or just Google it. That alone will help you understand the people that you have in your sphere of influence and learn about what it is that speaks to them. The love language isn't just the way that we like to give love, it's also the way that we like to receive it. And everybody has a top 1 or 2 love languages that really speak to them. Taking the time to get to know somebody will help you understand what they care about, and you can speak their language. Recently, I went to an Enneagram retreat where I learned a little bit about myself, my Enneagram type, and what it means to coach through the lens of the Enneagram. A lot of you might be wondering, what is the Enneagram? You've never even heard of the Enneagram. Well, the simplest way to put it is it really sort of defines the motives of a person. There are 9 different types, and this is so much deeper than just a personality test that you're probably used to. This gets into the deeper heart and spiritual issues that every human being ultimately wrestles with. And if we look at it through a Christian perspective, ultimately what we'll find is that all of us wrestle with different things in life, but we tend to do it through the lens of different motives. And we're ultimately, as part of that, moving from a place of brokenness to a place of redemption, which is something that we can only do with Christ. And so if we look at the Enneagram through that lens versus the Western culture mindset, which is really all about positivity and how can we get the best out of every type, but rather we look at it through the lens, a path of transformation from brokenness to redemption, we tend to see really what a person struggles with and what their needs are and what motivates them to not only do the positive things that they do, but even some of the negative behaviors that we witness. The Enneagram does a really good job of trying to explain and define how that works and why people do what they do. So if you spend a little time understanding your own type and the other types, this too can be another way in which you can ultimately learn about people and how to better care for them and meet them in their need. These are just a few examples of how to show people that you care for them. Unless we can do that, it's going to be very, very difficult to get the lasting respect that you really desire. But the truth is, there are often these common myths around what respect is. And I want to go through 7 different myths right now. And we'll just get this right out there on the table, because I know a lot of you are probably wondering, what does he mean? How do I get this? Besides just caring, that sounds great in theory. What is it that I'm doing wrong, or what is it that I'm needing to change right now to ultimately get me to the place that I want to be? Well, before we get into what we do need to do, we also need to tackle the things that we already do that we think get us that respect, that really don't produce the lasting respect that we desire. So let's start with the achievement myth. This is one of 7. Achievement, a lot of times we feel, is going to get us the respect, especially in our place of work, our place of business. We believe that, if we achieved certain things or accomplished certain things, that will command the authority and respect that others need for them to actually listen to us. And yes, that is absolutely a thing that's important. Credibility is an absolutely important thing if we want to sell something, deliver a powerful message, or lead somebody down a certain path just towards certain knowledge or wisdom. Those things do matter. but this is not something that ultimately lasts forever. This is specific to a certain thing that you're teaching or a certain responsibility that you have. But the truth is, achievement gets your attention until the person does something that deems them unworthy of your respect. So this happens all the time. You find somebody that ultimately presents something that you really love and they have a lot of authority in that space. But once you get to know them, you realize they're not really the person that they're cracked up to be. Maybe they're really good at something they do at work, but you realize, hey, at home, they're not really very kind to their family, or they're two-faced. They present one way in one environment, but a completely different way in another environment. And you kind of see the hypocritical nature and the multifaceted nature that really just speaks to their inauthenticity. And suddenly you realize deep down inside your mind that I don't know if this person is somebody that I truly respect. So it's great to have achievements, and it's great when that speaks to the authority in a specific subject matter. But really, to get lasting respect, it's all about the whole person, that integrated life that we've often talked about in previous episodes, right? So if we want to have an integrated life, we can't rely solely on achievement to gain the type of respect that we want. And by the way, I want to add here that the current generation, Gen Z, that's up and coming, there is a real breakdown between the genders in this particular generation. There is a rising issue between the men of Gen Z and the women of Gen Z, both young and the olders, that are struggling to connect because there's very different value systems between the men and women. And it's pretty astounding. If you Google it, this is definitely a trend that's being seen right now. And so this is a very important conversation about respect, because a lot of men are really angry right now about why they're not getting that respect or why they're not being seen the way they want to be seen. And some of them are just resolving to give up, and they're going in the wrong direction in frustration simply because they don't feel they can get that respect. So this episode not only helps the older men, but you younger men in Gen Z, I really want you to listen to some of these things, because if you want to get the respect from the other gender in this time, some of these are very important things that you need to hear to get that respect, the lasting respect that you desire. So that was the achievement myth. Let's move on to myth number 2, the value myth. Valuing others is not the same as agreeing and supporting their lifestyle. So it's important here to understand that just because we value another person and their inherent worth as a creation of God doesn't mean that we have to support everything that we believe. In today's time, we believe that they're kind of one and the same, and that's where we get it wrong. We don't have to agree with someone to truly value who they are. And so that being said, when you're looking for lasting respect, and we talk about caring for others, that also means valuing them and they're as an inherent creation of God. They have inherent value that God has given them. If we can begin to value all people, even those who disagree with us or don't have the same value, in the same way, with the same strength and the same resolve as we do with those who do agree with us, we're going to be able to demonstrate that in our relationships with all people, not just the ones that we like or agree with. And there's too much of that going on now, where we don't agree with someone, and so we lower their value in our minds, and then we begin to treat them differently because of that. And then we wonder why we have problems getting the respect that we deserve. There's something to be said about emotional intelligence and emotional resolve, emotional regulation, when we begin to feel ourselves getting a little heated because we don't necessarily agree with the values of others. But when we begin to disrespect the other person because of those things, we're not going to get the lasting respect that we want. So that's the value myth. Let's move on to number 3, the respect myth. Respect is not earned by position. It's earned by caring for and serving others well. right? We believe that because of a position of authority, we often believe that we get respect just because of it. Some fathers out there even believe that they should get respect from their kids just because they have the title of dad. Well, newsflash, guys, that's not how it's going to work. Maybe when they're young and really scared of you, but not when you get older and they begin to get, see life for what it is and get their own autonomy and start to see and develop their own ideas about how the world works. They're immediately going to start to see the flaws, and you will lose that respect if you continue to demand it. Respect isn't given through a position of authority. Respect is gained by caring for and serving others well. If you're at work, you're a manager, you have a position of authority, no matter how high you are on that ladder of authority, you are not going to get the lasting respect you desire if you're just going to use your position and cause fear in people to get what you're looking for. Ultimately, it's all about caring for others, regardless of the position that you're in. The next thing is the money myth, right? Money can buy happiness for a moment in time, but money cannot buy lasting happiness. Because one thing we know is no matter what we buy, eventually it gets old. Eventually it wears out. Everything in this life is temporary. Material possessions wear out, get old, break, and become obsolete over time. Experiences, eventually we run out of time with those experiences or we get bored of them. Money will simply not buy lasting happiness, nor will it buy lasting respect, right? You can't buy love, right? So ultimately we need to recognize that regardless of how much money you have, that also isn't going to get you the lasting respect. You can gain lasting respect regardless of the dollar amount in your bank account, even if it's a big fat zero. Number 5, the hard work myth. Working hard on the wrong things won't build respect. So you can work as hard as you want on as many things as you want. That does not automatically equal respect. Working on the right things will help you gain lasting respect. But there are far too many examples of people who worked many, many years on the wrong things and lost all their respect. There's a huge issue among, let's take pastors of churches. These are leaders of churches, guys, who have simply let their families down because they put more work into church issues than family issues. And meanwhile, their wives remain unseen, their children remain unseen and unheard, and they never got the love and attention that they wanted. And then they wonder why later their marriages are falling apart, their families are falling apart because they worked hard on the wrong things. It's not, hard work is important. I don't want to knock hard work. And even taking it back to the previous myths, right? Money has a value in the world that we live in. I'm not saying money doesn't matter. I'm not saying that respect by position, like your positions of authority, don't matter. Actually, there are greater consequences when you have a position of authority and you misuse it. All these things matter. Valuing others or the respect that we want by having similar values with others, those similar values that we have with others, they matter. And not having those values in certain circumstances can also matter. I'm kind of going back through this in a hurry, but what I really want to communicate is that all of the myths that we're talking about, these individual issues matter in certain circumstances, but when it comes to lasting respect, we cannot rely solely on these individual things, which we're calling myths, because some and many men actually out there, both before us and in current time, believe that if we do these things, that will be enough to get the respect that's lasting. And it's just simply not true, guys. We can't rely on simple hard work as a sole effort to get the respect that's lasting. The who you know myth. Some people really speak highly of it's not what you do, it's who you know. And again, Sometimes that's true. In certain circumstances, that matters, but we can't blanket rule that. Nor is who you know going to get you the lasting respect in all areas of your life. Who you know gets you to the point where you have to earn your own respect. Because here's the thing, who you know may get you in the door, but once you're in the room, eventually you're going to have to reveal why you deserve the lasting respect that you long for. Because it's very easy to get into the room, fail miserably at that, and you will end up getting kicked out of that same room that who you know got you into. So regardless, serving others well, caring for others, it still comes back to that to gain the lasting respect. And then finally, there's the commanding power myth. What I can do to you if you don't respect me. This is that fear-based respect, right? This isn't respect, this is fear. Let's put it to you real simple. Commanding through power respect is not really respect. You're causing people to fear you. And when people fear you, they don't actually respect you because given the first opportunity, they're going to run from you. And the lasting respect that you long for is about community and having close connection and relationship with the people around you. If you want that, you're not going to be able to do it through commanding with power and presence. It just simply doesn't work. You will get temporary compliance, but you will not get lasting respect. So these are just some of the common myths that I wanted to go over and squish, because if any of you are walking around thinking, hey, I got these achievements, right? I have similar values with the people. I have a position of authority. I have lots of money. I work really hard. I know a lot of important people, and I have a lot of commanding presence. That's great, but that's not going to get you lasting respect. That may get you temporary compliance. That may get you what you want for the moment, but all of those things are going to be temporary. They are not going to last. What we're talking about again in this episode is lasting respect. What are the things that get in the way of moving towards being able to care for others in a way that produces lasting respect? Here's a few items. Entitlement. I've noticed that there is a huge rise of entitlement among people. I'm owed a thing. I'm owed respect. Nobody is owed anything. We need to level set on that now. We don't get things simply because we exist, and nobody owes us anything. Impatience is another big one. I want what I want, and I want it now. Well, we're simply not going to get lasting respect with that type of attitude. We can't, again, that comes back to demanding, and there's some heart issues tied to that as well, which we're going to get into. There's a lack of grace and mercy, right? We try to monitor what people do and their behaviors, and we look and say, what do they deserve? And then we try to give them what we think they deserve, or we refuse to give them what they want or desire or need because we don't feel they deserve it. This also isn't going to produce lasting respect. There's a certain self-centeredness that we all have. Western culture tends to be much more individualized, and because of it, we value self-expression. We value individual dreams and goals and desires, and those are great things. But if we become only centered on what we want, what we feel, what we think, that self-centeredness is ultimately not going to produce lasting respect because it doesn't help people feel cared for. What it really is saying, I demand that you care about me and what I want. That's not lasting respect yielding right there. That's not going to get what you're looking for. Fear, ignorance, comparison, crediting a friend of mine who once received a vision from God. These are a few examples, along with entitlement, that God gave him in a vision. There are things that often hold us back from getting the things that we want. And I don't think that excludes respect, lasting respect. Are you afraid to step into a place that you know that you need to be stepping into, or maybe owning or taking accountability for things that you should have taken accountability for long ago? Fear will stop that, not going to get you the respect you want. Are you willfully ignorant? I'm not saying ignorance of the kind where you just didn't know, because at that point you can research, learn, and you can grow from that. But I'm talking about those of you who already know the right thing to do or the wrong thing that you shouldn't have done, and you did it anyway, and you continue to live this way, and you're still commanding and demanding respect. Well, guys, there is actually a right and a wrong way to do things. And if we know what those things are and we continue to go against the grain, again, we're not going to get the lasting respect that we want. And then finally, there's comparison, looking towards others and what they're doing and wondering why what they do works for them but doesn't work for us. We're not here to compare, right? Our one standard, if we are going to compare, and the only way we're going to compare, is to the perfect example that Jesus Christ was. He is the model that we compare to, and he is a model of perfection. So if we want to compare to somebody, let's compare to Jesus, not to other human beings, because the truth is we kind of all fall short of this anyway. So there's not really much of a comparison. But so moving on now, there's also another important topic we need to cover here when it comes to lasting respect. Often we can feel like we're doing everything right, but no matter what our efforts are, we keep getting feedback that says you're not doing it right. And this can be extremely frustrating. It can be very exhausting. It can cause us to shut down, to not want to pour into our relationships, avoid certain relationships, avoid certain conversations, just avoiding conflict altogether, because the pain of having those conversations and the anger that rises out of us because of it, it's too much to bear. So because of that, we tend to shut down and avoid. And that also does not produce lasting respect, simply because lasting respect requires vulnerability. It requires us to be connected to the people that we care about if we're going to get that respect. But we can't be connected if we're unable to actually deal with the conflicts and things that arise out of difficult situations. So I say all this to say, if you feel like you've done all the right things, but you still keep coming up short, maybe your wife is always complaining about what you can't get right. No matter what you do at work, they don't recognize it. Your friends are complaining about the things that you do wrong all the time. Your kids just aren't responding to you the way that you want them to respond. No matter what you do, it just feels like you keep falling short. Here are some things that I want you to consider as to why that might be happening. These aren't things that are generally talked about a lot, so that's why I want to raise more awareness around this. So the first, and this is a question, are we caring for people the way they want to be cared for, or how we prefer to be cared for? This is a common thing that we do as human beings. We have a certain way that we like to be cared for. Let's say, for example, I have the love language of quality time, which is true for me. I like to spend time with people. But my wife likes acts of service. Well, quality time for me means just simply often just sitting down on the couch at the end of the day and spending an hour talking about the day and all the different things that happen in the day, dreams, goals, visions, whatever. Just spending that time hanging out with her it really fills my love tank. But for her, it's getting busy in the kitchen, helping with dinner, cleaning around the house, taking care of the kids with their homework. When I do not do those things, no matter how much time I've spent with her, she's not going to get her love tank filled. And so in order for me to receive respect from my wife, I really got to do the things that she cares about in the way that she wants me to care for her, which means acts of service. But if I continue to force the idea that my way of caring for you is sitting down and talking with you into the night, and she's saying, no, I want you to do those other things. It's about doing, not just sitting and talking. I'm not going to get that respect. Ultimately, I'm caring for her the way I want to be cared for, not the way she wants to be cared for. So using that example, in what ways are you caring for others in ways that you want to be cared for instead of the ways that they want to be cared for? I realize this is probably going to be a sacrifice because you have to give up something you want in order to care for another person in the way they want. But this is what it means to follow Christ. We slowly learn to die to self and not just make it all about us. That's that self-centeredness. If you're struggling with this, that's that self-centeredness that kind of gets in the way. The next thing, right, that maybe causes us to miss the mark, even though we're trying really hard, is that we protect ourselves instead of understanding the other person's pain. The protests, right, that happen, this is this back and forth motion. We tend to go in conflict where somebody complains about a thing that you did, and then you complain back at the thing that they did, and it tends to build and escalate until a big explosive argument happens, and next thing you know, we're yelling and screaming at each other. And ultimately what that stuff is it's a defense mechanism because we believe the other person sees us in a way that we don't see ourselves. And so we want to protect the part of ourselves that we think we are from the version of ourselves that we think that other person sees in us. It may not even be accurate, but just the mere fact that we believe that the other person sees us in a way that we don't believe we are within ourselves will cause us to get defensive and begin to protect that part of ourselves that we don't want them to see or perceive us as being. And that protection ultimately blocks us from being able to connect with them and love them in a way that they need to be loved and cared for. So we're fighting really hard for something, but the thing we're fighting for is really, if we're honest, it's about ourselves and not about the other person. And so digging a little deeper into finding why do we protect certain parts of ourselves will heighten our self-awareness and ultimately help us to refocus our energy on them instead of just protecting ourselves. That's another way we can work really hard, but not actually get the results and the lasting respect that we're looking for. Another thing is that we all often ignore the other person's pleas for care repeatedly, but replace that other times, that time with things that we think matter more, right? And so let's say I'm cleaning out the garage, right? My wife is constantly nagging me. Let's say we're complaining. My wife's constantly nagging me about all the things I don't do right. But I spent 8 hours cleaning the garage this weekend. Did she ask me to clean the garage or did I want to clean the garage? Maybe I go outside and I clean the garage because it's quiet out there and all the crazy loud chaos is happening in the house where the kids are, and I'm out with headphones in, enjoying my music, just chilling, cleaning the garage. Now, my pride gets the best of me and I get a little bit excited because I accomplished all these things that I've had on my mind for the last several months. The garage is organized and I want my wife to be happy and excited that I accomplished all this, but she's really not, because while we were outside cleaning the garage and enjoying our music, she was inside dealing with the kids and all the chaos on the inside of the house. And you wonder why you don't get the respect, right? Again, it always, always, always comes back to caring for others and serving them well, and specifically in the way that they want to be cared for and served. If you're at work and you're focusing all your attention on something that you prefer to work on, but your boss or your coworkers have been asking you repeatedly to do something else and you keep rejecting it because you don't want to, or you don't feel like it's important to you, or you don't think it should be done, and then you're wondering, why did I get passed up for the promotion? Why didn't I move up in the organization like I wanted to? All of these things are going to play into the core idea that you're not caring for others in the way that they want to be cared for. The next one is that we simply, if we're honest, we simply just don't like certain things that people care about. We don't agree with it. So instead of addressing that, we simply dismiss it and we do everything else. So we intentionally do other things to try to avoid the specific thing that that person cares about, because secretly we don't agree with it, we don't like it, we don't want to do that thing. And so out of our own frustration and a little bit of arrogance, if we're being honest, we intentionally dismiss it and do a bunch of other things. Again, not going to produce lasting respect. Another thing we do is that we procrastinate or disregard, but we blame it on our busy schedules. So the next step after dismissing, we get hit with the conflict or the protest that, hey, I asked this for this repeatedly. I thought you cared. I thought you were going to do X thing. Don't you understand how busy I am? I hear it from guys all the time. Work is really busy. There's so much on my plate. And yes, of course you have all those things, and those things are very, very real. I have those things. But if we truly love the others in our life, our wives, our children, our friends, our coworkers, if we say we love them, especially as a follower of Jesus, and yet we do nothing to care for their needs, how can we truly say that we're loving them? We cannot just continue to disregard and dismiss them and then blame it on our busy schedule, right? Because at the end of the day, they don't really care about our busy schedule. They care about what they're dealing with. And if we're going to love them and get the respect that we long for, it's about looking at what their needs are, what their cares are, what their busy schedule looks like, and how we can support that. And if your schedule is too busy, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your schedule. Another thing is that we think we do everything right, so why can't everybody else, right? This is an attitude that I come across a lot too. And one day I'm actually going to do a whole episode, I think, on this, and something I call brands of sin. What we tend to like to do is we take a particular issue that we know that we've perfected or worked out or become exceptionally good at, and then we usually have something else that other people do that we particularly don't like. Maybe it's a way somebody hurt us in the past, or there's a particular scenario that we've experienced negative emotion around in our history, and we see people do similar things. And so we use the thing that we've perfected to slam and push down the struggle that another person has, simply because it reminds us of something bad that we've experienced. And if this is happening in one of your close relationships, this obviously will create great conflict. But the truth is, you struggle with something. We all do, probably more than one thing. And so what happens is when we pick at everybody else and their struggle, but intentionally choose to avoid or not deal with our own, we're not just going to not gain respect. We're going to probably lose it, because eventually when somebody gets to know you well enough, they know what your struggles are. And that is seen as a very obvious fact. It's not even inconspicuous anymore. So that's a surefire way to not only not gain respect, but to also lose respect. So all of these things involve a lot of intensity, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of fighting and conflict, but usually to no avail. You cannot get the respect. You end up feeling like you get no respect, and usually from that comes a lot of anger, frustration, shutdown, avoidance, and just outright dismissing of another person. Again, not going to produce lasting respect. To take this one layer deeper now, we got to talk about where this stuff comes from in our hearts, because all of this comes from somewhere. These are the things that people see on the outside that we're talking about. But what's now happening on the inside of our hearts when we struggle with these things that ultimately lead us to not gain the respect that we want? Well, the first thing is that we tend to process what others do through the lens of our own experiences, our own past pain, and the coping mechanisms that we use to manage them. ultimately what we do is we tend to expect from others, in layman's terms, what we expect of ourselves, or more accurately, what others always expected of us in the early years of our lives. So if I, just to use as an example of what I mean, because I said a lot of words, if I'm really, really harsh and I expect others to know that when I'm angry at them or I'm in conflict with them or I'm getting into an argument or a fight, my harshness, if I expect them to receive that well and respond back and that probably comes from a coping mechanism that I learned earlier in my life because of others that were harsh with me. And because I couldn't deal or defend myself in the pain that I experienced during that time, I learned that in order to deal with harsh people, I have to become harsh myself. And that's just the way the world works. I'm now going to expect other people to do the same. But the problem with this can create a very arrogant, self-centered, prideful way of approaching conflict. And I always use the example of how I used to see words. When I was young, I used to get I had a lot of harsh words used against me, and it used to really hurt me in ways that would send me spiraling in my room as a young boy for days and weeks and even months. It was not a fun time of my life, but what I learned through all that is that harsh words must be spoken to fight back. And that was the way I coped with it. So when I became a married man and I got in a conflict with my wife, you guessed it, a lot of harsh words came out of my mouth, which really hurt her. And because I had to learn to cope with those harsh words, I expected my wife to do the same. That's not fair. That is a very nasty way, a very selfish way to view my expectations of another person simply because I had to deal with it. Now, for sure, it's very sad, and I feel for all of you men who had to deal with those things when you were young. And I strongly suggest to do the work to tease out those difficult things and mourn and grieve the struggle that you've had to go through, because it's absolutely essential that we deal with those things if we're going to learn to love others well. But this is a major heart issue that most of us deal with. And if we don't deal with those types of issues in our life, it's going to be a whole lot of blind spots and a lack of self-awareness that's going to make it extremely difficult to gain the respect that you want. Simply put, deal with the childhood wounds that you took on and how you managed to cope with those wounds in unhealthy ways so that you're able to get to a healthy place and communicate and respond and regulate, if you will, your emotions in a healthy way. Another place that this can come from, an issue with our hearts underneath all of this stuff, is that we have generally a rebellious heart, right? This comes straight out of the Bible. There is the effect of being in a fallen state. Mankind is in a fallen state. Our hearts are in rebellion towards God and in rebellion towards each other. And usually what's behind that is this little attitude that says, I can do this all by myself. I don't need God. I don't need other people to tell me. Everyone has an opinion, but I have mine. We get into issues like relative truth. Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. Let's not get in each other's way. All of that is really the pride of life when it comes down to it. It is the original sin that caused the fall of mankind. And unless we admit that that's always seated deep within our human hearts, we're going to fail to recognize times where that pride shows up and ultimately is eroding our relationships. And usually there's this part of us that's like, hey, there's something about other people aren't safe, right? A lot, even when the enemy convinced Eve and Adam to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the fall. If you can read about this in Genesis 3, if you haven't already, he convinced them ultimately that God was holding out on them, that somehow by eating the fruit that he told them not to eat, they would gain some sort of knowledge that God was holding out on and didn't want them to have. And so they went against what God told them not to do and did it anyway, and ultimately it caused death. And this curse that we all deal with now, the fall of mankind, is generationally for all mankind. It affects us all, and we must own that, because that is an integral part of our faith and what it means to walk with Christ. The first thing we must understand is that we are in a fallen state, so that we see the need for a savior. And this fallen state does in fact affect our relationships, the way we respond in conflict, and the difficulties and challenges that life brings. There's also this idea of deception, right? The enemy is always whispering in our ear, trying to convince us to do things that we know we should do, but we don't do them, or maybe we shouldn't do them, but we do them anyway. There are people in our lives that continue to influence us to do things that are not healthy, but because they've been close to us for years, they continue to pour into us, and we don't want to mess with those relationships because they're important to us, but we fail to recognize that there is a subtle form of manipulation happening, because there is truth to the statement that birds of a feather flock together. And to be more specific, if you're meeting the same kinds of people and struggling with them, or you're stuck in similar habits and behaviors that you haven't been able to part with for years, try changing the circle of people that you're involved with, and you will probably begin to see a difference. If you're struggling with the same type of person that you just can't seem to stop repeating the same outcomes with, try something different. Get outside the box of thinking that says people and things have to be this way for me to be okay with it, and try something that's different than what you would expect. You will be surprised at the changes that makes. But part of that is this rigid idea that I know better, I know what things should look like, and I'm not willing to look at things from a different perspective. That also gets in the way and plants negative seeds in our hearts that ultimately grow bad fruit, right? If we want to gain lasting respect, perspective sometimes is also important, especially when it's perspective different than our own. Not perspectives that are going against the grain of what God taught us, but perspectives that are different than what we're comfortable with. And a lot of times there are perspectives that are different than what we're comfortable with, but are still very important and do align with our values. We've just not been willing to take those perspectives in. Another issue that can hinder our hearts from being able to care for others in the way that gains lasting respect is that the state of our own lives often can depress us, and the pressures of life can ultimately embitter us. And if we're not anchored in God's love when that happens, that bitterness will grow, and ultimately we'll isolate ourselves, or maybe we begin to treat people poorly because of the stress that we're under. Those mental health issues and the stresses of life need to be dealt with, right? Whether it's through therapy, professional help, having a strong community of other believers around us that can help coach us through that when we're hurting. If we ignore those things, that bitterness will grow and ultimately make it more difficult to gain the respect that we're looking for. And then the final point is that we simply can't love well ourselves until we receive love. We have to be loved well to know how to love well. There's absolutely no way that any of us can love really well if we've not received that first. We know because we were first loved. We know love because of Christ's death and resurrection. What he did at the cross is a demonstration, right? Because remember, strong men don't demand, they demonstrate. And our very Lord and Savior did that. He demonstrated on the cross how far he was willing to go for us. And that is what love looks like. Model our lives. We must model our lives after that. To the point of death, we're willing to give to others for their benefit and not solely our own. And then finally, there's the faith perspective on all of this. Romans 12 really does cover a lot of what I talked about here. But I want to hone in specifically on verse 18. Verse 18, Romans 12:18 says, do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. So Paul here is talking about he has all these rights and all these things that he could demand, and he even has the stature and the knowledge and the experience and the achievements and all the things we talked about to back him up. He not only could he walk the walk, he could, or talk the talk, he could also walk the walk. But what he's saying here is, I give all that up because the main goal, right, is ultimately to live in peace with everyone so that they will know Christ. The ultimate goal is always, always, always to lead others closer to Christ. And what better way to lead people to Christ than being an example of Christ to others? And how do we be an example? We're willing to go to the point of death to love and care for others the way that they want to be cared for. That is what Jesus did. That's what we're called to do. Taking it to another scripture, 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23, 1 Corinthians 9, verse 19 through 23. It says, even though I am a free man with no master, I've become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. See, there's the theme again. We're bringing people to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under that law. Even though I'm not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who are under the law. When I'm with the Gentiles who do not follow Jewish law, I too live apart from that law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. Now, this is important, right? Because he's saying, when I'm with different people, I don't do things that will make an obstacle for them to get to Christ. I remove the things that aren't important. And he makes the point here that he doesn't ignore the law of God. He still follows Christ. He still follows his commands. He still does the loving thing the way that Christ instructed. But he's not going to do the things that create obstacles for people, and he's going to care about the things that other people care about to give an opportunity for them to know Christ. Right? He has become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. That's really what we've been talking about, guys. We're talking about how do we become what people around us need us to become in a way that demonstrates who Christ is in their lives. Continuing on in verse 22, when I'm with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. So the entire mission is ultimately, again, to demonstrate who God is by emulating Christ's behavior and love to and toward other people. That is how we gain lasting respect. Now, I want to be careful. This doesn't mean constantly changing and shifting in an unhealthy codependent sort of way where we're just everything that everybody wants, we do it. We have no boundaries. We don't matter. That's not what I'm talking about. But so many of us struggle with this because we're just fixated on what we want and what we need, and we aren't willing to sacrifice any of that for the benefit of others. Those people don't tend to be cared for, and because of it, they never know the love of God, which you could be a perfect, clear example of if you were to care for them and meet the needs of where they are. That's what we're speaking of when we talk about emulating the love of Christ. So this about sums up this episode. There's a quote that is one of my favorites by Teddy Roosevelt, and it goes like this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. This is a very important thing to remember when it comes to gaining lasting respect, men. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you want people to respect you, if you want women to respect you, and I will say this, a lot of the damage and the things that are going wrong with those of the opposite gender that we often become so frustrated. It's the failure of men. Failure of men to care, failure of men to address their needs, to respond to their needs, to listen and not defend. A lot of that is our fault, guys. We did not show that we cared. And now we have an issue and we're struggling with that issue and we want to blame. But the question is, are you going to look in the mirror? Are you going to hold a mirror up to yourself and say, what do I need to change about me to become a better man so that I can care for others and love those women and those other men in my life well? And the first thing you need to do, perhaps, is to learn to receive the love of God for the first time yourself. Because regardless of where you're at, He will meet you where you are. He will love you. He will give you the grace and mercy that maybe even you struggle to give. And when you learn to receive that, only then and only then will you be able to give it back to others. And again, I want to reiterate the point that the culture we live in is very individualized. And this has a huge impact on the way we live our lives in the United States, because we tend to value self-expression and self-interests and self-goals and personal dreams. But this can be to our detriment, because if we aren't able to care for the needs of others and find out how we can be in unity with others to move towards a common goal or a common dream, ultimately we will end up stepping on people to get what we want. And that also is not going to get us respect, but it's also going to hurt the population at large. Others aren't going to experience love and grace and mercy. They're going to experience hate and jealousy and rage and anger and unhealthy competition and those sorts of things that are ultimately going to destroy connection between human beings. So that's all I have for you in this episode. If you want lasting respect, learn to care for others in the way they want to be cared for. If you need help or you'd like to reach me, I will put links to my contacts in the episode description. And you can also email me at info@beaconleaders.com or david@beaconleaders.com. I'll be happy to talk with you and set up a call even if you need to talk. Once again, remember to subscribe and follow me if this was helpful to you in any way. Until next time, remember to lead well, live on purpose, and honor God with your life. And also remember that strong men don't demand, they demonstrate.